when the administration was exhorting the country to go to war against Iraq and building up the case, right, for Iraq being a threat, you would think that a certain amount of common sense would enter into the situation. You would think a certain amount of common sense would say, now wait a while. Here's a country that's been on the other side of the world, a small country that's been devastated by 2 wars and 10 years of economic sanctions. And you're telling us that they are a threat to the United States of America, which has 10,000 nuclear weapons? But common sense can be shunted aside in the face of a propaganda assault by the government, collaborated with the press. And so when Colin Powell appeared just before the onset of the war in February 2003, when he appeared before the United Nations, some of you may remember that, Colin Powell appeared before the UN to give the evidence of the weapons of mass destruction that Iraq had accumulated. And he gave an enormous amount of detail, so many canisters of this, and so many tons of this, and so much of this, and so much of that. And the press really went for it. And the Washington Post editorial was entitled, "Irrefutable." It is hard to imagine how anyone could doubt that Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction. New York Times was similarly just breathless with admiration. Turned out, of course, that it was all lies. It was all made up. It was all untrue. But the press did not investigate. The press did not ask questions, you know. And then there's another question that might be asked is, granted that the press does this, and the press historically has done this, why do the people believe it? Why do the people not question the press? What is it about our culture that makes the population prone to accept, one, what the government says, and two, what people say on television or in the newspapers? And I would argue that that has a lot to do with the loss of history, with historical amnesia. I think that's the phrase that Studs Terkel has used, an amnesiac country. It's as if we were all born yesterday. If we don't know any history, it's as if you were born yesterday. If you don't know any history, then anybody can get up, anybody in authority can get up before the microphones and say to you, we've got to go to war. We're being threatened, we're in danger, liberty is at stake, democracy. You have no way of checking up on it if you have no history. Now, this is all stuff that's happening very far away. You have no means of ascertaining what the truth is, and you have no history. If you knew some history, if we lived in a culture that really taught history, I'm not talking about the history that we do get taught. I don't mean any kind of history. I don't mean history that sort of glorifies everything that we have done as a nation, and history that's based on pledges of allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, and no. If you knew some history, which was different from Orthodox history, you would know how often presidents have come before the public and said, we've got to go to war for this reason or that reason or another reason, and you would know how many times the president had lied to the public about the reasons for going to war. If you knew some history, you would know about the President Polk coming before the public in 1846 would say, well, we've got to go to war against Mexico because American blood has been shed on American soil, and how Congress immediately collapsed, as Congress always does when the president asks for war. Well, it doesn't have far to go in collapsing. It's, it's already in a state of semi-stupor, and the president then goes ahead and makes a statement, and this is what happened in the Mexican War. There's very little debate. American blood has been shed on American soil. Nobody asked. Well, actually, a young congressman from Illinois asked. Abraham Lincoln asked. He introduced what we call the spot resolution. He said, where's this spot where American blood, actually, the spot where this clash had taken place between Mexican soldiers and U.S. soldiers, the spot was actually not on American soil, but was in disputed territory between Mexico and the United States. But it didn't matter, right? We were at war. And took a while before, of course, there were protesters, and Thoreau went to jail in protesting against the Mexican War, and there were soldiers who deserted in large numbers from the Mexican War, and there were Irish immigrants who had been cajoled into enlisting with promises of this and that, who, when they saw the mayhem on the road to Mexico City and began to think about and ask questions, what are we doing here? There were Irish soldiers who deserted from the American army and went over to the Mexican side, and they formed St. Patrick's Battalion to fight with the Mexicans against the United States Army. The Mexicans every year still celebrate the San Patricio Battalion, and but that's, if you knew that history, you would know that Polk had, in his diary, before anything took place on the border between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande River, you would know that Polk had written in his diary, it would be nice to have California. I mean, California was part of Mexico. Arizona, Colorado, Utah, that whole beautiful Southwest, that was part of Mexico. How ironic now that they don't like what I'm saying. It's ironic that these people in Congress are going to pass legislation to build a wall. Now, you've read about that, right? A wall along the border between California and Arizona on one side, Mexico on the other side, a wall to keep the Mexicans out of the territory which we stole from them in 1848. We live in a bizarre time, do you remember when the Berlin Wall came down and everybody was exulting? Oh, my God, those communists, they put up a wall to keep people out from going from one place to another? We don't do things like that. No, of course, the Israelis have put up a wall against, the occupied territories, and it's a time when it takes all of your strength just to maintain a little bit of sanity. But history can help. And if people knew the history of lies and deceptions, if they knew how, in 1898 we went into Cuba, presumably to free the Cubans from Spanish control. We're always going somewhere to help people, always invading countries to help them, and to free them and to give them democracy. And this is what we did. And in fact, there was some truth to this. That is, we did liberate the Cubans from Spanish control, but not from our control. The Spaniards were out, we were in. Spain was out, and United Fruit was in. And American banks were in, and American railroads and Vanderbilt, they were in. And from that point on, Cuba was ours. And do we bring democracy to Cuba? We brought dictatorship after dictatorship after dictatorship to Cuba. And now, of course, we complain because Cuba is a dictatorship under Fidel Castro. He's not the right kind of dictator. There's dictators who are okay and dictators who are not okay. And we supported a long list of dictators who are okay.